So for the people listening, trace files are pretty much like an archive of all the actions that have been taken in a Playwright script. So it's all the console logs, all the network requests and responses, all the actions. And the most freaking cool I think of is the DOM snapshots. Mm-hmm. So you can step through your test and see, and then you can click a button and you can see what HTML was present when Playwright tried to click this button, which is wild. So you can debug, open up this HTML, and the developer experience of that is pretty nice. I have to agree there.
Hey there, welcome to Beta Talks, the podcast.
I am Rick.
And I am Oscar. And today we are joined by Stefan Judis, who is a freelance front-end developer. Welcome.
Welcome, Stefan.
Well, that's a fancy intro. Thank you. Hello. Thanks for having me.
That's also to make up for us being the hosts of the show. So it's great to have you on. And we were just chatting a little bit up front. We initially met in a Twitch chat somewhere on a channel, and then it actually stood out to me that you're doing a lot of things with web development and also testing of web front ends. So I thought it would be really interesting to invite you for one of our episodes. So first of all, and that's maybe most interesting as far as your personal or your professional life goes, you are, according to LinkedIn, a front-end developer, but also do Playwright, and you're also a DevRel as a service. So maybe you can explain a little bit what it is that you bring to the table.
All right. So I'm a freelance web developer from Berlin, Germany, and I do web stuff for, I don't know, I'm on the 12, 13, 14 years. I have a strong front-end background. So I focus primarily on HTML, JavaScript, CSS, these kind of things, then went into framework stuff, was leading a team here in Berlin. And so that's where the front-end background just comes from. I have a computer science degree, even though nobody ever asked me for that, but you probably can relate to that. Mm-hmm. And then just one day it happened that here in Berlin, a company just reached out to me and was like, hey, Stefan, you do so much in the Berlin community. Do you want to get paid for that? And that is, I don't know, 8 years ago, somewhere around this time. And was like, wait, what? That's a job, kind of? And then I switched companies. So I entered developer relations. And back in the day, so 8 years ago, was like the entire industry tried to figure out what that actually means, right? It's developer products need someone to go out and talk about the developer products. And then I started doing DevRel, whatever that means or whatever that meant, and was like, okay, let's figure that out. The company itself was also like, let's figure that out. On my first day, I kid you not, it was like, I came in, so what should I do? And the CMO back in the day was like, well, do your thing. It was like, what does that even mean? And from there, I just jumped around a few companies here and there. And yeah, now I decided to go self-employed. I worked for multiple companies in developer relations and have still a strong or deep love for the web. So I'm really kind of like building good stuff is what I like to think of what I do, like web standards, building good, performant, accessible kind of products, and talking about nerdy stuff, reading about nerdy stuff. That's pretty much what I do all day.
That sounds really good, right? And there's a lot of things that I would like to get back to there. And let's start with the fact that you do a lot of web development. I think if you look over it, especially over the last 15 years, but even the last 5 years, I think web development in itself has changed tremendously, right? Because initially it used to be either really flat or it used to be a product like, let's say, ASP.NET or something like that was kind of complex. But now, even with what, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of complex or very complex. It depends on it depends on your knowledge, right? Yeah. And your experience. But if you look currently, I think I know that there's even stuff that's called front-end architecture, and we now put way more thought in how a front-end needs to be constructed for it to be maintainable, for it to be performant. How did you make that transition yourself?
Into the complex stacks or in learning about the complex stacks?
Well, both actually, because of course you need to learn about them to be able to transition into them. But was it for you hard to see, hey, we're actually moving into a way more versatile, so to speak, environment with all of that web front-end development?
Yeah, so when these kind of things, so I want to believe that the complexity came in when the industry or the world kind of moved all the functionality over into the client, first of all, right? We had this big shift with the first frameworks that were single page. So I started with Backbone back in the day. It was kind of the first abstraction layer. It was kind of trying to moving everything into the browser and kind of doing more in the browser. And from there on, everything spiraled somewhere, right? Where we are right now. And now we even go back into the server, but that's probably a different topic that we can cover on a little bit later. So, and initially I was just, I'm just excited about technology, right? So, and when you have a front end background, it is pretty nice that you can start just talking to APIs. So back in the day, it was like, oh, cool, I can do the entire thing, and we can separate these both worlds, right? So the rendering part and the API layer. So it was a front end dev and the back end dev, and then they shipped things, and I had all the control on the client to build good and kind of cool animations, interactions, all good UX in the client that worked great. So from there, I was just like super excited because I had more power back in the day, right? And I was like, oh, I can do a lot of things, and now we can transition from A to B. I remember it was like the first single page applications were in kind of a route transition where no blank screen or no white screen was in between, and everything was moving around. And I was like, whoa, this is something that is different here right now. Fast forward a little bit, I think what I realized at some point is that we as an industry, and we're still there, and that's not going to change, we kind of went for complex first when building new things. And this is when I kind of started looking into what does it mean building good stuff for the web, right? And every nail has a hammer, right? There are always a thousand solutions to a problem. And I think like 5 years, 6 years ago, we kind of went, or at least the front-end or JavaScript community went always for the biggest hammer we could find for building anything.
Or the newest hammer, if it was a JavaScript framework, right?
Yeah,
with instructions,
yet another framework, right?
How to assemble the hammer first.
Precisely, yeah. And when you then start, when you kind of realize, when you see front-end engineering a little bit more of a craft of building performant products, building accessible products, building fast products, all these kind of things, you quickly come to realize that, well, this hammer that I just assembled with my own tools to ship a tiny thing isn't always the best solution. So from there, kind of looked into, or I went into more standard thing. And I think this is a very important question to ask all the time is, hey, what are we trying to do? And I think this is a question that we're definitely not asking enough, because not every marketing site needs 5 megabytes of compressed JavaScript or these kind of things, right? And I still do like, or I still use complex things when I need to. For example, think of cutting edge tools, right? Figma or something. Figma cannot be built with a simple stack. That's just not possible, or anything very, very stellar with good user experience. But not every marketing site, not every landing page needs the complex hammer. So right now, I see myself kind of in between. But the question is kind of, the important question is, hey, what are you trying to achieve, and what is the right hammer, right? Use the right tool for the job. And from there, I think we have to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. I hear a lot of pushback on like the single page approach and the complex frameworks, especially the last couple of years. But then I hear all the reasons. It's like, yeah, but that sounds like a website, not really an application. So please avoid it. Like, of course, if you have like 3 forms on there, why would you do all that? Why would you have the 5 meg upfront load and indeed to set up the tool chain? While those frameworks really evolved, like they're now like 2 minute running from zero. Like, and you used to be have to pick your tribe of tools to connect together and get a build system running. It was very complicated. These tools evolved greatly, and I think most of them even got simple again. We went to over engineering there for a long time. But like in the discussion when to use server-side rendering, when to use something simple or something really lightweight, I think there is a pretty good judgment you can make up front. Like if is basically a replacement for something that we would do 20 years ago on a desktop, versus the brochure kind of thing that also needs some automation at the end, or some fancy form or whatever. Not everything is a full-blown application. Indeed, the Figma is a great example, of course, with all the interaction and the graphics there. Like, that's impossible to do with server-side rendering, or like I wouldn't recommend.
Some people tried. The UX wasn't great.
No, indeed. So there's a bit really big. It depends, and how do you go about asking the right questions before to start there?
I think the question that you brought up is probably the one that I start with. Is it an application now, or is it something that is more closer to a website, right? So, and it's always a matter of trade-offs, right? With a single page application, and even though with the solutions today, we ship kind of static HTML, right? And then we hydrate everything, and then becomes a single page application. But there's always the question if it needs to be like that, right? Because trade-offs are everywhere. And when we're dealing, for example, with more like a website, I would always opt in for the more pure stack, because an application stack will never be faster when it's 10 times heavier. That's just a fact. If you just need to ship HTML and you have some transitions or some more pages, and maybe your product or your marketing site or your shop or something has a session length of 3, let's say 3 pages, right? Do you need to opt in for this long user journey or these kind of things? Probably don't. Also, browsers are pretty strong these days with shipping new features, right? When it comes to UX and new kind of visual features, there's a lot going on with view transitions, so that we can ship a simpler stack while providing all the sugar. I think that is definitely a reason to go after. And then there are some questions to also circle around. So, for example, I'm working on a client project right now where we will just have massive load, for example. And the question is there, should that be a single page app? And we're kind of circling around the question, well, static HTML upfront would be nice, but we have so much dynamic data, then we have to beef up our servers, and we have to, I'm not a full stack DevOps person, right? But we're just testing things out, and was like, okay, how do we handle so many concurrent requests with this stack, with this JavaScript rendering on the server? Should we do this? Is this even possible? Do we open up a big problem here? So scalability is also a problem, right? Because single page applications, you ship some JavaScript and all the stuff is happening on your user's device. And if the user, he or she can, if they're working on good devices, if you're shipping for Africa, for example, that's probably not a good idea, or for a country that doesn't have high-end phones, right? If JavaScript isn't running there, well, probably your JavaScript single page application won't do the trick because they use Opera Miner, which isn't executing JavaScript at all. So I think there's no silver bullet, and it's always a matter of trade-offs, like always in computer science and nerd stuff, right? But I try to, there's a saying of go with the lowest tool possible, right? With the least complexity first, and then see how far this brings you. And I think this is a good mantra.
Yeah, like for everything, really big, it depends, and pick the right tool. No matter we're talking about AI or backend or front end, it's always like even with especially you as a front end developer, like the CSS or the styling packs, the UI systems out there. What kind to choose there? Like even Bootstrap was fully overblown, and at some point, like people used that and completely rebuilt it until they only used the grid. So like it's always that thing, and I think starting with the least amount of complexity to get where you want to go gives you a lot more room to go to a more complex solution. While the other way around is usually very hard because you depend on a lot of things up front that you might not even fully understand how they work.
Yeah. It's also a matter of how quickly things break, right? The web or core. So when you treat it like an order, right? HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML doesn't break, right? Browsers are pretty good at rendering bad HTML. They will just forgive you, and they will just do whatever comes in and will do the best. Similar to CSS. If the browser doesn't understand CSS, no harm done. If you ship JavaScript and your JavaScript blows somewhere on the way, well, then you may be looking on a blank screen, or you may be looking at this statically rendered single page application that comes in HTML but breaks on the way. And that is kind of frustrating and funny in the same way, right? You're doing all the effort to ship HTML, and then something happens in the client and everything goes white after everything was already there. And and this comes just due to the complex stack that you're choosing in the first place, right? And that can just happen.
Yeah, and then you need to add extra bundles of JavaScript to start monitoring what's happening pixel by pixel on the front.
Yep.
And then even more JavaScript gets injected. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
So one thing that I would really like to know is, what are your go-to frameworks for developing in the front end?
I go as least complex as possible first, right? So the things that I do, the smaller projects I usually use, they go with 11t, which is a independent static site generator. It's super flexible. The data layer is super nice. So that works very, very well for all the static stuff. Plus, if you are happy or good with the process of having a build step, this stuff, you just put it on a CDN and it works, right? It also works for marketing sites, for everything quick that can have a lot of traffic and it's out of your way. It also doesn't go down, right? Because a Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare, they go down, but the chances are very low.
Then
right?
The rest is down as well. So
yeah, so exactly. So that's not a problem. For complex stacks, I'm following the majority of the world. So I'm very comfortable with React. I did Vue for a few years, but I'm more leaning towards React. And yeah, the big beast right now is Next.js, right, from Vercel. And they're doing some very, very interesting things. And with the shift of React also going to the server side, becoming PHP, right, like people joke these days, there's also a certain JavaScript reduction happening, which I think is the most fascinating part of this, because we're shipping less JavaScript now. And the React core team recognizes, hey, maybe we don't need all this stuff, because it's wild when you think of it, right? You render HTML and then you ship a JavaScript bundle that includes the same template as JSX again. So you're always shipping everything twice, which is wild when you think of this. So the community or the React core team goes, and all the major frameworks do the same, right? They're going slowly now. Maybe that wasn't the best approach in the first place. So how can we make this slimmer? And I think this is fascinating. So I think Next.js is the first major framework that now supports React server components. This is why I'm leaning to playing with it. I'm not maintaining anything in production there right now. And on the other side, I'm also using Remix from Shopify, which was acquired from Shopify, which was independent first. And everything these days, at least in the JavaScript communities, circles around web standards and how can we move more things to the server. And I think this is, as a whole, a good progression from where we were 3 years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then next to that one, I think things like accessibility also get more and more important. You just talked about it yourself, where how can we build an application or a website that's not only nice but also accessible. And there, I think you see a really big difference between different types of frameworks or tools that you can use, where some of them have this accessibility, let's say, almost built in by default, but other ones are really running into issues where accessibility hasn't been thought of upfront, and they are now having really big issues in implementing. Now, we are more from the Microsoft tech stack, so one of the things would be to, for instance, use a Blazor web application and then use Mod Blazor. I mean, I've tried making that accessible for a website that we were maintaining internally. It's almost impossible to do because there's so many abstractions and so many things holding you back that it's next to impossible to do that without actually training or changing the source code. So going into the repo and fixing it there.
Accessibility, like security, is really hard to build in after.
Oh yes. So what's that like with for instance, things like 11t or React? Is that more? Does it have more grip on accessibility?
I mean, it kind of depends on how you first of all define accessibility, right? Accessibility is a topic that is so huge, coming from assistive technology to how fast is it, what performance plays into accessibility, how accessible is it for the developers to work on, right? So 11T as a pure static site generator is very close or very low on the stacks, which means when I am confident or when I could write good semantic websites, I'm pretty close to this, right? Whenever you move a little bit higher the stack and you go for more abstractions, and I think it's similar to what you described with Blazor, then you're just one level higher, right? Which means if you want to really improve things a level below, it's just behind something, right? It's behind some abstractions, some classes, some more code. And this already becomes way harder to do then. And I think the same abstraction there, or the same problem there, exists in more frameworks. But it's also kind of a matter of how visible is, and that's an interesting question that I don't have the answer to yet. If you pile on more stacks, right, and it doesn't matter if it's Blazor, if it's React, or if whatever is happening in other ecosystems of the developer communities, right, at the end, there will always be a certain output, right? For the web, it's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript or something. The more you abstract on top, you have to look in the industry and what should people know, right? What should people know? What should all the new joiners learn to get a job, right? And then you have the problem, okay, should I know how frameworks work, how React work, how Blazor work? And do we then, as an industry, expect that people know the stack below, right? And I think that's a very fascinating question, because we're in an industry, there's already, at least in the front-end community, it's like, oh, you're maybe a purist, right? You're close to the fundamentals. And we're like, yeah, I mean, that's what we're paid to do, right? We're there to ship websites. And then there are other people, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with this. Yeah, I'm a framework ABC developer, or I do this. And because you mentioned it, I mean, we're dealing JavaScript communities here. We have a new framework tomorrow, right? You cannot learn about the fundamentals, about building good, performant, accessible, nice UX-y stuff while keeping track of all the things that all these smart developers create tomorrow. So that's an interesting question on how to approach this. Hey, let's build good stuff for the web. Generally, I try to lean towards let me understand how this works and let me inspect what is the result of this. But maybe we as an industry or as a web community are on the way to just treat the fundamentals like HTML, CSS as just something like bytecode, right? Maybe this is so far away in 10 years that we're like, wait, you're writing HTML? What is happening? Why you do this? I don't know if this will happen. Right now I'm leaning towards let me understand how this works and let me see what comes out of whatever tooling is in place.
Yeah, I think the approach of like what abstraction you're on is everywhere in all technology.
Yeah, it's in backend as well, and
and abstractions are nice because it makes us be very productive, stand on the shoulders of giants to build something quick, complicated, and maintain it. But I think the what you see is that it's a bit greater maybe in front-end JavaScript because the world is pretty accessible for new devs. You can go in there even without formal training. Like I think you can go in there if you're the right person for it at all levels, but and get something out really quickly, and then you tend to become basically a power user of some kind of framework or. It's almost like it's almost low code kind of approach to a framework, and then if you really don't know what's behind it, fine, be productive. But what I see is that developers that are most successful at least know one abstraction further, so that you know what is going on under the hood, and you don't have to be able to build that or even build your own framework. But if you don't know what the effect is, you tend to build really low performing systems with a lot of side effects, which is kind of fine. But you're also stuck then on that stack, and you will be the one specialized in that. And I think while you're on a train, you might go deeper and deeper in that, and especially on the front end, you see that these things have a lifetime. That's pretty short, because even in the stacks that are around a long time, like React and Angular or From 2 is basically the same stack, but they also changed their mind like 5 times about some really big opinions in there.
But it's probably also because browsers are continuously improving as well, right? So the possibilities and the are also...
You can drop a lot of things.
Yeah.
But there's so many different approaches. And I think if you know one stack and you know the basics, like you could work in them all. But if you only know the stack and I just build websites with this all day, then you might be restricting yourself in your further career.
I 100% agree with this. I think the rule shouldn't necessarily be look one level below. I think the rule or the advice should probably be curious to understand how things work, right? If you're really hammering, if you're entering the industry and you're coming out of the boot camp here in Berlin, right, and you do React for the 3 years and you didn't care about what is happening under the hood, you will have a hard time when your company migrates to whatever, right? Then you're pretty much like, oof. Okay, I start from zero again. But if you started kind of establishing this curiosity to see, hey, this is how this works, this is what comes out of there, it's like, whatever, it's similar. And I think the same applies to all stacks again, right? If you have a person with a good fundamental knowledge, they will figure it out. Just throw something at them and they have this curiosity or even already the knowledge to say, all right, I mean, it's just SQL, right? Whatever we have on top, I will figure it out. And this is similar how I feel about the front-end frameworks, right? It's like Remix, React, Angular. So when I went freelance like 10 months ago, so I started doing Angular, I don't know where we are now, 16 or something. My last
18, yeah.
18. my last line of Angular was 10 years ago and was like, all right, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
And I think if you're very close to just doing React for 10 years and really just do React and you don't know how to do other things, it's like, okay, I have no clue what's happening. But if you have a little bit of understanding what's happening below, I think you will have, looking at the front-end career or career in tech, you have a better time and you're just better set up.
I think you actually touch upon a really important point there. And that's something that I've heard a couple of people say now. It's the curiosity, but also maybe passion even. I mean, we're all techies. We're all maybe geeky or nerdy, but also that means that we just like to figure stuff out and see how it works and see if we can manipulate it in such a way that it works for us, right? So how do you keep up to date? Because one of the things you do is I think you're the person behind Web Weekly, right? That's a lot of information helping other people see new stuff. But how do you keep yourself updated?
I'm addicted to tech news, I guess. So I'm excited about the web. And when I figured that out, so when I started doing web programming, I was like, this is cool. This is honestly cool. Now I'm turning 40 next year. I was like, this is still cool. Nothing is really nice. And I'm just excited to see what's happening, right? So usually my work or my day flow is in the morning, I read the tech news like an hour every morning. That's what I do. I just like to see what's up. And I established this kind of habit to just think about, learn about, and just keep it going. And it also, it gives me kind of the feeling, so it's kind of, maybe I shouldn't say addiction, but I cannot stop kind of learning, reading, but I also like the stimulation of constant input. I think this is what I like about it. Is I read something, oh, you didn't know about this, and then I'm falling into this rabbit hole, and it's like, oh wow, you didn't know this, and this now works, and this is how this works, and I just like to discover and dig deeper, and like, oh cool, and this will help me then to build better stuff going forward.
Oh yeah, so it does, but you also need to. You need to make the time to do that, right? I mean, it's really easy to fall in the rat race and just say, "Oh, I need to do this or I need to do that." But it's something that you need to actively make time for, right?
Yeah, that's a prioritization. So so every Sunday I sit down for 6 hours. So usually during the entire week I see what did I learn. So actually I would have to take a step back. So Web Weekly kind of. The newsletter that I now run, it's a small newsletter, but it's constantly growing. And at this point, I'm also a little bit proud of it because it becomes a thing slowly but surely. But I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I think everything started with me actually starting to blog. And blogging by itself is, for a lot of people, myself back in the day, very intimidating, because it's like, what do I know? What do I have to tell the people? Why should I now write something?
Especially with a comment section, right?
Yeah. But it feels like publishing something, really.
Yeah, people are mad. People have opinions, especially in JavaScript land, right? But I somehow made it like really a couple of years ago to just let that go and treat my blog as like a public scratchpad or public notebook. And from there on, I started blogging really just short notes of all the things that I learned. So just today I learned post, and sometimes they're 100 words, sometimes they're 1,000 words, right? Just for me, because this then gives me the possibility to just say, I forgot how this works, but I know where it is. Yeah. And I know I learned that once.
Your external memory.
Exactly. And at that point, I just started making these things public, and there are now several hundreds of these nitpicky or very small facts, right? This is how this works. This is how this, I just discovered that. And from there on, a few people started like, this is great. You should talk more about this. And from there on, I then started doing the newsletter. And it's just like, hey, Stefan, you share a lot of, or you write down all these nitpicky things or small things that are very easily overlooked. And from there on, I prioritized that I just wanted to share more, I guess. And it started kind of like, I called it Stefan's Web Weekly first, or Stefan's newsletter, and was like, no, that's not going to fly. And then someone pointed to me out that webweekly.email is free still, the domain. I was like, okay, let's do this. And after I bought the domain, I was like, okay, shit. Now it's official. Now you have to roll with it. And
there are a lot of people that don't feel that pressure after they got a domain.
I do feel like I feel guilty when I miss a week. So I missed last week, and I feel guilty about it. But now it's just the thing that I do on Sundays. It's I sit down and go for a run, and then I sit down and I get this thing out. And the more people are listening or not listening, are reading along and are following and are answering and saying, hey, thank you, I learned a ton here again. This just keeps me going. And that's what I do enjoy a lot. That said, there's also a nice side effect, right? When I run a newsletter and I have a well-maintained blog, it does help with getting jobs in the industry. That is just, nobody expects it. But if you have a good blog and run a newsletter around web tech, getting jobs is just nicer. So it's paying off.
It helps. One thing I actually read in there, because I do read it quite often, one of the new things I read was hide auto might be becoming a thing.
It is animating hide auto. Yeah, that is becoming a thing. It's shipping in Chrome. So that is a problem since forever, where everybody makes fun of CSS, right? Why doesn't this work?
Center tag.
Center tag.
and there's so many problems that are now slowly over the last year or 2, 1.5 maybe, CSS is becoming a powerhouse, which again pushes forward dropping more JavaScript, right? So animating to auto will ship in Chrome, or ship, I think, in the last release. Everybody's waiting for this, but we now also have the has selector, which makes a lot of things so that you can style parents depending on their internals, which is wild because you can drop a lot of JavaScript by just looking, hey, what is included in this element? You don't need to toggle classes, or hey, does this element include an image? Do I need a grid, or do I need to center things? All these things are now CSS only. And then there's this wild stuff, which, for example, there are view transitions, first of all, which also work across MPA, so really HTML requests, so that you can animate things from left to right with 2 separate HTML calls. That is the argument a lot of people had for JavaScript first stack, right? We want to keep the nav. And we want to slide something from there to here. This is CSS only in Chrome these days. So Safari is following along. And with that, we already have a market share of 85%. So that is coming. Then we have scroll-driven animations. So some people like to fly in things when people scroll and do these kind of things. This is also CSS only. There's so much stuff happening in the CSS world these days that it's just like, whoo, good time to be a front-end developer.
It feels like we need to do an entire episode on just whatever new thing is happening in CSS.
Well, someone is spending 6 hours a week on this.
So he might know a thing or two. Just by the way, Oscar, do you know what time it is?
It's time for Totally Random Question.
It is time for Totally Random Question.
Okay, here goes. Stefan, what's the food you usually refuse to share?
Ooh, I'm absolutely no foodie like at all. So I appreciate good food, but I would never make an effort for good food. So I'm the frozen pizza kebab person. And for that reason, I would say, if you want to have it, I give you half of it, whatever.
From anything that you're eating?
Yeah, I just don't give a damn about what I'm eating.
It's just for nurture, not for enjoyment, or
yeah, it's to survive. So I appreciate a good food, but I would never ever care about it too much.
Okay, fair enough. Oscar, do you have anything that you wouldn't share ever?
Well, if I couldn't order more of it, then there's a lot of things I wouldn't share. I'm fine with sharing. Like I have my wife always orders something else than I'm having, so that she can also taste that.
Yeah.
You know that one?
Yeah. Or she says, no, you don't have to buy me. You don't have to take fries from me. It's,
just want to have a bite.
I'm not hungry.
She also won't. She will actually just take one bite, so it's okay. But like I'm huge on ribs.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So I used to have a really big problem. No, not a really big. I used to have an issue with people wanting my food, especially if it's the last piece of, you know what, I want to close off.
That is bad though. I agree.
Yeah, I want to close off decently, right?
Yeah. You prepared to the end, right? I do that.
Yes.
I was like, this is the last bite.
Yes, and then they want it from you. And I used to have an issue with that, and then I got kids.
Yeah.
It's different, man. It's different now.
Tend to give stuff away then, yeah.
Oh yes,
all the time.
At least more easily than I used to do so a couple years ago. Okay, circling back to front-end development, and one of the things that you actually are quite actively working on is doing stuff with Playwright, right? Because developing stuff in the front end also means testing that it does what it needs to do. And then Playwright is a relatively new player on the market. I see you, Oscar. It's relatively new. But it's proven to be very powerful, I think. You are a Playwright ambassador even, right?
Yep.
So what does that mean? And for those maybe not necessarily knowing what this is, what is Playwright in itself?
So Playwright is an end-to-end testing framework coming from Microsoft. It stands out, so end-to-end, so you control browsers, right? Before that, Cypress was pretty much the leader for developer experience in browser front-end end-to-end testing. Then Microsoft took along. Playwright stands out because they, first of all, support multiple browsers. Not sure how strong of an argument this is these days, because browsers cross...
All the Chromes.
All the Chromes, yeah. Exactly. But they also switched the approaches a little bit, how you write code and how you set up end-to-end testing. And I feel like they're kind of putting the next level of DX, developer experience, sugar on the entire topic of end-to-end testing. So you can record your end tests. You can really just click around, and then you have to clean up a little bit because Playwright will record your actions for you. The overall ergonomics of writing and maintaining end-to-end testing, it's just super nice and clean. It feels good. And Microsoft pushed Playwright into the market. I think they are these days the leader, according to downloads at least, when it comes to end-to-end automation. And I just what I like about Playwright is, first of all, browser automation is a nerdy topic that I like to do. It's just like press a button and you see a browser doing things. I just enjoy this, even if I'm in a very gnarly debugging session. I'm like, yeah, that's still cool to see this happening. But when you start developing and testing your things end to end, first of all, it gives you a little bit more safety. And this is something, I'm a very anxious person sometimes, especially when I'm working on a production app that is kind of important, right? Sometimes it's just like, yeah, it's broken and we fix it next week, right? But if it's an e-commerce flow, or if it's something really core where there's really money on the line, I like to know that I didn't break something. And Playwright definitely helps with this. And when you start kind of, the same applies to maybe unit integration testing, and we don't have to talk about the entire testing pyramid here, but when you start kind of developing end-to-end tests, Playwright forces you to build good front ends, because there are some approaches baked into the testing framework that will just show UX shortcomings. And that is what I do like about writing Playwright tests, because it kind of helps me rethink, hey, is that good UX here right now? And yeah, Playwright Ambassador, the Microsoft team will reach out when they notice you do things in public about the stuff they develop, and then you ask if you want to join, and then you join. And you get swag and a base cap and connections to the inside.
Well, that helps. I mean, that also means that you will be able to give feedback on the product, but also on new features probably, right?
Yeah, if there's time, we can connect to the development team. There's also one of the core developers is also based here in Berlin. Every now and then we have coffee and hang out. But it is kind of these, hey, you're a little bit closer, you're spreading the word for us. It's also close to developer relations, right? You talk about things, come into the inner circle, and here are some stickers. And if you need something, let us know.
Here are stickers. Yeah. That's something for you, right?
Stickers, always good. Yeah.
They always work. People love stickers.
Yeah, I know.
Easy.
I think stickers and socks.
I just gave Rick a few new ones.
Yeah, stickers and socks. When I used, back in the day when I had booth duty for the companies, I just always ordered these random packs, sticker packs at Amazon, where you get 500 random stickers. Always the most busiest booth, I tell you. It's all the daddies, mommies. Oh, I love stickers, and this is for my kid, and everybody's just super excited about all these stickers.
That's always right. It's for my kid.
I can see that on my laptop.
Oh yeah. Oh, Ninja Turtles for my kid. Yeah.
Nice.
Good. Now, but also if we circle back on Playwright, you mentioned like multiple browsers, but it's also multiple languages, right?
Yeah. So I'm primarily doing JavaScript and TypeScript, but you can also do Python.NET is also included. So,
Java,
and I also
I think
Java is also. I think they're pushing forward the most with JavaScript, and then they're kind of porting it back to the other languages.
Yeah, what you see is that the JavaScript version brings its own runner, so its own test runner, and that means that they can do much more evolution in there that they can do in the other because in for instance .NET is based on NUnit. That's the recommendation. But all kinds of controls are then in the unit testing system. Which they cannot just change because it's a project on its own. So it's also up to the community to maybe build that.
Yeah,
that's what Debbie also said when we had her on the show, right? So we had Debbie O'Brien here, who is also for working with Playwright. She also said exactly that, right? It's primarily we start with JavaScript and then the rest will follow accordingly.
Yeah, we stepped with our team like 2 years ago into Playwright. We had a lot of Selenium background. And you touched upon the test period, but I think a tool like Playwright will make you make different decisions there. Where you used to like make small unit tests and make maybe API tests and whatever. Playwright is so freaking powerful. It can run in isolation, headless. We're cramping like in only minutes, like thousands of tests at the moment. Where we used to have like 12-hour runs at night that couldn't cross each other. It's such a different world, and an end-to-end test in the end should be most stable on any regression. So it helps us a lot, and we are even running now with the the testing as a service, the remote execution of them in the Azure cloud.
Yeah,
it's awesome because it's just pay as you go, serverless. Build agents just kick the process off, and it will run in the background. And you get the results back, and you have that nice, what's it called? The file that you get that you can browse through and inspect and go.
The trace files.
The trace files are awesome. That's so much different than a video.
Yeah,
you can just go back.
It took a lot of people to realize and say, "Hey, how can I record stuff?" And it's like, no, you don't need to record.
You don't want that.
so for the people listening, trace files are pretty much like an archive of all the actions that have been taken in a Playwright script. So it's all the console logs, all the network requests and responses, all the actions. And the most freaking cool I think of is the DOM snapshots. So you can step through your test and see, and then you can click a button and you can see what HTML was present when Playwright tried to click this button, which is wild. So you can debug, open up this HTML, and the developer experience of that is pretty nice. I have to agree there.
Yeah, you get in and you think, oh, this is a video, and then you find out it's actually an interactive video with developer tools.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's it is awesome. I think it really changed testing for us at least.
Yeah, and I think the point that you just brought up is an interesting one, right? Because when you consider testing, there are almost religious debates sometimes, right? Do you do unit integration end to end? And I'm more like, I don't care. What is the effect to the user, right? So, and I'm not saying that unit tests you shouldn't write unit tests. I mean, you're the one to decide what you should test when, right? But a Playwright or an end-to-end test, if you're happy and if the results are giving you the confidence and safety that you're looking for, this is what your users will have at the end, right? Your users will not care about the failing unit test, but if something is broken in the production app, your Playwright test probably will cover that if you are taking on your user first hat and say, okay, these are the things that should work. And this is kind of what gets me super excited about this.
It's nice to see the passion come through, right? There's still a ton of things I would like to discuss with you, but we're nearing time. So I would like to ask you if there's anything that you would like to get back to or anything that you would like to add to what we've already discussed, where you think that's something people at least need to know. Or
oh, that is an interesting question. So something that people at least have to know.
So we will share the Web Weekly link in the description.
They need to know a lot.
So they need to know where to find your Web Weekly. That's for one. But is there anything else that you would like to add?
If people want to read along, I have a website, stefanjudis.com, right? It has an RSS feed, so I'm a strong believer in RSS. Drop all the algorithms, decide what you want to read yourself. And as a last statement, I'm a big fan of creating and blogging. If you write something down and share it with the world, I think that is something that people should do.
Awesome. Stefan, thank you so much. It was a blast having you on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Bad to Talks, the podcast. Bad to Talks is made possible by Bad2Bit Managed Software Development.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.